How many times have you heard someone say, "Oh, just wait until they get a jumper," or "If they develop X part of their game, they'll be unstoppable," in regards to a young player with potential? During the draft process, NBA front offices become very fixated on project players. Their potential is sky high, and if they hit, it can change a franchise forever. But many times, once they get to the league, their weaknesses are ignored and outshine the limited strengths that they have. We've seen this across other sports like the NFL, specifically quarterbacks, where putting all your chips on a raw prospect with physical traits can get an entire front office fired and set a franchise back for multiple years. And in the NBA, project players appear much more often now than they did in the past, due to the importance of the three-point shot and the new perimeter skills from bigger players. But how often do these guys actually pan out, and why do teams keep taking a gamble on such a high-risk scenario? Every raw prospect can be considered a project, but this issue has become more relevant than ever before during the modern era of basketball. These players are considered either a jump shot or body transformation away from being a star or productive player. They're usually younger prospects that are in the long athletic and show flashes of a jumper mode. Teams have been taking gambles since forever, but like I said, it has really ramped up over the past decade or so. A raw prospect's success heavily depends on the coaching staff and environment they're drafted to, as well as the overall structure and time that player has to grow. These factors are even more important in a very tactical sport like football. We see quarterbacks fail so much because of poor coaching and the unwillingness to give that player years to develop. Back to the NBA, young talent face this same problem because teams are impatient and new prospects arise. Even though teams say they're willing to take their time, the truth is, with how talented new draft classes have become, raw prospects have become more expendable because teams know they can find someone else ready from day one to replace them the following year. That's what has me asking the question of, should teams continue to spend high draft capital on project players? Not every franchise is set up for that commitment, but there are numerous teams who are attempting that today. There's newer projects like Amen Thompson and Tidjane Salaun, who are a part of two vastly different run franchises and is shown in their growth as players. Then there's ones that the case may be closed on, in Jonathan Kuminga and Patrick Williams. Two guys who both had their own questions in college, or the G League for Kuminga, and now haven't lived up to the potential they had coming out. But of course there's some hits, like Scotty Barnes and Evan Mobley. I'm not 100% sold on Barnes, but there's no question that he's filled the shoes as a franchise corner piece for the Raptors. And Evan Mobley, fresh off of Defensive Player of the Year and only getting better. I'll dive deeper into these guys, along with others a little later in the video. But for now, let's take a trip back to when teams began to take these high risks during a potential shift in the game of basketball. One of the first modern introductions to this case study was Hasheem Thabeet, the number 2 pick in the 2009 draft. Thabeet was a 7'2" All-American being compared to Dikembe Mutombo coming out of UConn. Hands down the best defender in the country, his own coach called him one of the most dominating players in the history of college basketball. He was physically gifted and extremely athletic for his size, and was well on his way to breaking the NCAA record for career blocks if he stayed one more season, but he decided to enter the draft. Sounds like a perfect pairing for a league that still valued dominant big men, right? Well, his weaknesses eventually overshadowed whatever talent he had defensively. Despite averaging double-digit points his final 2 years in college, Thabeet was seen as a very raw prospect who needed a lot of refining to his game. Having only begun his basketball career at 15 years old, Hasheem was still learning how to operate as a big man on that side of the floor. He had no skill in the post, had very poor hands, and was very clumsy in the paint. Teams knew Thabeet was the biggest gamble in the entire draft, given that he was inexperienced and new to the sport. But the Grizzlies loved his defensive abilities and were banking on the huge ceiling he possessed, and believed they had the foundation to develop him into a very productive NBA player. But they were in fact very wrong. Prior to the draft, the Grizzlies were focused on 4 prospects: Tyreke Evans, James Harden, Steph Curry, and Hasheem Thabeet. They hoped to find a trade partner to move down and select one of the 4, but after no deal materialized, they had to make a decision on who to use that top 2 pick on. That decision was heavily influenced by team owner Michael Heisley, who just so happened to be a Big East graduate from Georgetown that was concerned about his team's defense. They decided on Thabeet, but weren't expecting the future that the rest of the roster would create. After 3 straight 21 seasons, Memphis found themselves with a very solid team after trading for Zach Randolph and the rights to Marc Gasol, drafting O.J. Mayo, Mike Conley, and Rudy Gay, and signing key vets like Allen Iverson. This left Thabeet at the bottom of the totem pole and unable to play through mistakes on an unexpected playoff roster. Those offensive holes from college kept up with him early on. He had no back-to-the-basket moves, poor hands, and a bad overall feel for the game. Assistant coach Damon Stoudemire said it only took 10 minutes into his first practice to realize that Thabeet wasn't going to be good. And his rookie year was going so bad that Memphis offered him and O.J. Mayo to the Warriors for Monte Ellis at the trade deadline. Golden State, of course, declined it, and Thabeet was sent to the D-League, becoming the highest draft pick ever to be demoted. Halfway through the next season, he was finally traded to the Rockets after just 1.5 seasons with the Grizz. His value was so low in the league that Memphis had to attach a future first-round pick to him just to get Houston to take on his contract. Throughout his 5-year career, he never averaged more than 13 minutes per game and became one of the biggest busts of all time. To be given up on after just 1 season and given no real chance to grow in a stable situation ultimately failed Hasheem, but his issues on the court might have been too big to overcome anyways. It was the prime example of what not to do as a franchise drafting a player that you know will take multiple years to even scratch the surface of what he could be. But the greatest example of what to do when developing a project is the Bucks with Giannis Antetokounmpo. Coming into the 2013 draft, Giannis was profiled as a raw prospect with outstanding physical tools. He was the youngest player in the draft and drew comparisons to international stars Boris Diaw and Nicolas Batum. He was a skinny 6'10" and barely 200-pound forward whose level was tough to determine because of the poor competition he played in Greece. But the Bucks took Giannis at 15 and had a plan for him, and stuck by that regardless of the early results. That plan really took off in his 3rd season, when Jason Kidd decided to play him at point guard full-time. This move was made to maximize the skill set of their young forward. This was also around the time where he began to gain weight, shooting up to 222 pounds, adding 22 pounds of muscle since his rookie year. Head coach Jason Kidd and the Bucks brass saw how fluid and comfortable Giannis was pushing the ball up the floor after grabbing a rebound, and this made them buy into the idea of having him be a full-time point forward.
We're going to go forward with him handling the ball, and you can call him point guard, point forward, point center, whatever, however you want to look at it. But, you know, with him having the ball and the pressure he puts on the defense and his ability to find guys has been a plus for us.
And it worked out, as he saw his stats increase to 17 points, 7 rebounds, and 4 assists per game. The following years, he only saw improvements. He won Most Improved Player of the Year, made All-Star teams, All-NBA, and All-Defensive teams. But during that rapid rise, the Bucks had to make a decision on their other young star, Jabari Parker. Parker, who just so happened to play the same position as Giannis, but with a completely different skill set, was drafted 2nd overall a year after him, and was a much more polished player offensively early on. He averaged 20 a game his 3rd season in Milwaukee, after tearing his ACL his rookie year. But he expressed his disappointment with his playing time next to Antetokounmpo during their time together. And there was a real conversation for who was better between the two at the time. But Giannis was consistently making improvements, and after another torn ACL from Parker in a contract year, both of those factors made it much more easier for Milwaukee to completely buy into the Greek project. And that buy-in paid off. Immediately after Parker's departure, Giannis won back-to-back MVPs, then led the Bucks to their first ever NBA championship since 1971. Milwaukee had a plan in place, and despite questions along the way, they stuck to it. But it also helped that they drafted one of the hardest workers in the league and didn't even know it at the time. Giannis improved something in his game every single year, and even now is still adding to his game. Even though he really never figured out the deep ball, he improved his body and interior game so much that he doesn't even need it. But during his greatness, there were plenty of failed attempts trying to replicate this model along the way. There was Thon Maker, who was basically a 7-foot wing that could create on the perimeter in high school. Drafted 10th overall to the Bucks to play next to Giannis, the unicorn-type player failed miserably to become anything near his potential. His problem was his frame and inability to round out his game to compete against NBA-like bodies, forcing the Bucks to give up on him after a few seasons. Or the most notorious player deemed a jump shot away, Ben Simmons. Ben wasn't seen as a huge project coming out of college because of how physically imposing he was as a 6'10" point forward. But all you ever heard during the beginning of Simmons' career is if he gets a jump shot, he can become this and become that, but it just never happened. And the Sixers waited as long as they could until it was time to cut the cord. He's now out of the league and even contemplating retirement after his agent dropped him when he noticed Simmons showed no interest in an offer with the Knicks. There were also smaller failed projects like Sekou Doumbouya, Romeo Langford, and Isaac Okoro. 3 lottery picks whose inability to create on the perimeter and shoot in college and overseas was ignored and weren't given the freedom to play through those holes, ultimately leading to their jobs being taken. James Wiseman also fell victim to this, but his circumstances were more unique than any failed project I've ever seen. He was drafted into a great situation, a franchise needing a center with a history of great development, and a team ready to give him meaningful minutes. His biggest problem was that his skill set didn't fit anywhere near how the Warriors like to play, and he didn't show the skills in college or high school to transition to that side of the game. He was a heavy back-to-the-basket big that struggled finishing with contact, and his shooting range was very limited. In a near-perfect world, Wiseman could have been a pick-and-pop weapon next to Steph Curry, but that wasn't his strong suit, and Steve Kerr wasn't willing to give him consistent isolation looks closer to the rim. It was just a horrible fit from a basketball standpoint, in a situation that had no real plan for a team with championship aspirations, and a player with high expectations since he was a teenager. The hit rate for projects seems very low, but like Giannis, when the team hits, they hit big. That's what typically happens when the Toronto Raptors take a chance on a prospect, as they become one of the best developmental programs in the entire NBA. Their biggest success being a 22-year-old from New Mexico State who was born in Cameroon, Pascal Siakam. Now, Pascal isn't nearly as great as Giannis, but in terms of changing a franchise, he definitely had a similar impact. Siakam had all the odds stacked against him coming into his NBA career. He was an older prospect, played against a lower level of competition in college, and had only been playing basketball for 5 years. He was discovered in the NBA's Basketball Without Borders program in Africa, and many NBA execs at the time were puzzled by the choice, citing that there was no doubt that the Raptors could have done so much better with this pick. He was considered a reach, but Toronto GM Masai Ujiri, who had a long history of drafting under-the-radar players, had a vision. That vision started in the D-League as a rookie. When Pascal wasn't spending his time with the Raptors cheering on his teammates from the bench, he was in the D-League, leading them to a championship next to fellow rookie Fred VanVleet. He was named Finals MVP, averaging 18 and 8 along the way. But his skill set at the time wasn't nearly as polished as others in his draft class. He didn't have any outside game and was more known for his hustle and rebounding, with a solid foundation in the post. But Toronto knew that when they drafted him, and their strategy of letting the rookies improve in the D-League ultimately paid off. After 2 years of sitting behind guys like Patrick Patterson and Serge Ibaka, in 2018, Siakam earned a starting role and jumped from single-digit scoring averages to 17 points and 7 rebounds a game, and winning Most Improved Player of the Year. He was arguably the second best player next to Kawhi Leonard, and helped lead the Raptors to their first championship. But after Kawhi declined to return back to Toronto, the keys were officially handed to the once 22-year-old prospect who many thought was a reach at pick 27. And he continued to improve, with his most drastic leap coming in arguably his best season of his career. He averaged 23 points and finally added the 3-ball to his game, shooting 36% on 6 attempts per game in 2019. Throughout his 7.5-year career with the Raptors, the Cameroonian made 2 All-Star games, 2 All-NBA appearances, and finished 10th in MVP voting in 2020. The Raptors' Pascal Siakam project had officially been fulfilled, as he became a true number one option after waiting his time and growing his game. More proof that with the right environment and structure, raw draft picks can surely end up being a huge success. During the current era of the NBA, more players than ever are being drafted high based on potential and ignoring some of the glaring holes they had coming in. This year's draft saw one prospect being selected at one of the riskiest positions to take a project at. Igor Demon was taken at pick 8 to the Brooklyn Nets, but had some glaring question marks that shied NBA teams away. Demon is one of the if he develops a jump shot kind of guys. He shot 27% from 3 on a high volume attempts at BYU. Half of his shots came from beyond the arc, and the production just never caught up to the amount that he was shooting. The outcome of his career may truly depend on that, because with how good of a playmaker he is, he can still be a solid role player, but the gap between a role player and a superstar point guard all depends on if he figures out his perimeter game. And the Nets didn't take him at 8 to fit in. They chose him to stand out and be that guy on one of the worst teams in the league. But looking back to last year, 2 of the worst rookies ever statistically came from the 2024 draft class, and they just so happened to be projected as long-term projects before they were selected. Tidjane Salaun and Cody Williams are 2 guys that many fans have questioned why they went as high as they did, and if they have any real future as productive players in this league. Salaun came into the NBA as a very raw player who lacked experience, only playing basketball for just a few years. He was far from ready to play on day one. His feel for the game needed work, the on-ball creation was poor, and his body strength was a few steps behind other prospects at his size. But the one thing Salaun had for himself was a shooting upside at 6'9". Even though his mechanics were, and still are, inconsistent, that was his bread and butter, and the main reason the Hornets took a chance on him at pick 6. But the Frenchman was statistically the least impactful player in the league. He averaged just under 6 points per game, shooting 33% from the field and 28% from 3. His effective field goal percentage was 41.7%, a 3rd percentile number in the league. His field goal percentage at the rim, 56%, a 7th percentile number as well. He also had the worst offensive rating in the entire league for players who played at least 20 minutes a game and at least 20 games in the season. Nothing came easy for Salaun on the offensive end. His negative impact with the ball in his hands and inability to get his shot off that he showcased in his years internationally was exposed against the best basketball players in the world. But he, in my opinion, has a better case than Cody Williams to round out into any kind of success, because he has a foundation with his jump shot that he can build on. For Cody Williams, his inaugural season was as bad as a rookie could have. Cody, the younger brother of Thunder's second option Jalen Williams, put up arguably the worst rookie season out of any lottery pick this decade. The simplest way I can put it is that he just didn't look ready in any fashion to play in the NBA. Coming out of Colorado as a highly touted high school prospect, the Zags were very excited about the idea of a 6'8" wing who could play on the perimeter. Well, that idea didn't consider the fact that he was just not a good basketball player yet. In college, Williams went through several injuries, creating some inconsistencies. He was arguably the 4th best player on his team, and was the least NBA ready out of his 2 drafted teammates in KJ Simpson and Tristan Da Silva. Williams has a very skinny frame, only weighing 178 pounds at 6'7", but his 7'1" wingspan attracted NBA teams, and ultimately pushed him high up draft boards. His rookie season, he averaged 4.6 points on 32% from the field and 26% from 3 in over 20 minutes a game. Cody had one of the worst shot profiles in the entire NBA, with historically low relative true shooting and efficiency field goal percentages, points per shot attempts, and points per possession. He had the worst player efficiency rating in the league at 3.68. In fact, the Jazz were statistically a much better team with him off the floor. Out of all the players that played at least 20 games and played 20 minutes per game, Williams had the lowest net rating at negative 15.5 and a bottom 10 offensive rating at 103. Utah's team net rating fell at 7.51 with him on the floor. They scored 8 fewer points per 100 possessions with him in the game, which was in the 15th percentile of the league. And their turnover rate improved from the 10th percentile of the league all the way to 69% when he was off the floor. The same issues he had in college were exposed in the NBA. He had a poor handle, struggled to play through contact, and lacked a jump shot. He was drafted based on raw talent and potential, being taller for his position. But the one thing that the Jazz did regardless of how bad Cody was playing is they let him play through his mistakes for the entire season. I explained it with Giannis. If you have the opportunity and situation, letting your younger guys gain consistent experience regardless of the results will either benefit or at minimum answer a lot of questions in a shorter period of time. But in my opinion, the way things are trending, these two players may end up as yet again another failed project that was drafted way too high. But the case may already be out for a few young players that have had the time to fulfill their potential after multiple years of experience. Scottie Barnes, Jonathan Kuminga, and Patrick Williams are three former top 10 picks who were drafted strictly off potential, but each have different results of their developmental process. For Barnes, like I said earlier, I'm still not sure if he has a skill set to be a number one option on a contender, but he easily has reached his potential and improved on his weaknesses. The jump shot was the biggest question, but taking a chance on a 6'8", 225-pound point forward was the biggest high-risk, high-reward situation in the 2021 draft. Scottie played basically every position at Florida State, and had every aspect of his game besides his shooting. And Toronto loves their forwards, and have a history of developing the position, so what better spot to land at than the house that former project Pascal Siakam helped push forward. He won Rookie of the Year, and only enhanced his versatility in his 4 years in the league. He's pretty much a point forward who can be the lead ball handler and create not only for himself, but for his teammates as well. Barnes' skill set on paper sounds like the perfect player in today's NBA, but the only thing that has me hesitant still is of course the jump shot. Although he's gotten better, it's still an up and down battle. He's gone from 30% down to 28%, back up to 34%, and now at 27% from 3 this past season. So he's shown flashes, and Toronto has done right by him by encouraging him to take these shots to unlock their offense even more. He was rewarded with a $225 million rookie max extension, so I consider this project a success. But for Jonathan Kuminga, his results are more so in the middle. In somewhat of an underwhelming turnout of early career, Kuminga had all the tools to become a premier wing for the Warriors. JK is a freak athlete, with great size for a wing at 6'7", 220 pounds. With the G League Ignite, his biggest hole offensively was his shot, shooting 24% from 3. He also had some tunnel vision on the ball, and these two issues has ultimately led to his demise in Golden State. He was seen as a project that could play from day one, and even though he may have had some holes offensively, he was so good around the rim and athletically defensively that his floor was high enough to stay on the court. But his career so far has kind of been the opposite. To start, he was drafted to a team chasing championships, so his margin for error was already really small. That can be one of the worst circumstances for a player with raw talent to come into. This resulted in an inconsistent role and a few disputes with Steve Kerr about his role and trust in the offense. Now, Kuminga averaged 16 points in 2023 and 15 points last year, which is a huge jump from his first 2 seasons, showing that he has made some type of leap in his own individual game. But that's not what Kerr and the Warriors need, already having Steph Curry, Draymond Green, and now Jimmy Butler. His job is to run the floor, cut off the ball, and sometimes be a roller in pick and rolls. Kuminga has been boxed into a position where he has to play off the ball and play off of his superstars in a very structured and cemented offense. So despite whatever improvements he's made individually, he's not really able to showcase that in a winning environment right now. This resulted in a stalemate between he and the Warriors in terms of a new contract and trade talks. It took an entire offseason and into training camp of disagreements about a long-term deal, but Kuminga has finally joined the team after settling on a 2-year, $48.5 million deal with the team option. He just doesn't fit the Warriors' playstyle. He shot 30% from 3, isn't willing to sacrifice his playstyle, and ultimately wanted way more money than he's worth. It's been a confusing start to Kuminga's career. He's had some successes, but in the big picture, the team that drafted him has already realized he's not beneficial to their team. Then the last of the three, Patrick Williams, who hasn't equated to the high price tag of 4th overall that he was taken at. Williams spent 1 year at Florida State, where he didn't start a single game for the Seminoles, but put up a respectable 9 points per game on 46, 32, 84 splits. His calling card was defensively, in any situation where he could use his freak athleticism. He was very coveted out of college because of his athletic traits, and this aspect helped mask his holes on the ball as a creator. Offensively, there were a lot of question marks. No one really knew if he had the game to become a high-level scorer in the NBA, and was seen as a prospect who needed to be drafted into a near-perfect situation to maximize his game. Teams knew Williams' scoring was a work in progress, but were willing to bet on him reaching whatever ceiling that was possible. He was a prototypical forward for today's NBA, and it was obvious why so many franchises loved the thought of him on their team. The Bulls took him at 4, buying into the athletic profile and plug-and-play potential for a team desperate for a young star. Early in his career, Chicago gave him all the opportunity to play through his development. He started every game of his rookie year, and didn't have a bad season scoring just under double digits a game. But a season-ending wrist surgery in his sophomore campaign started the first of many setbacks. Pat Will came into the following season and got his 3-point percentage to above 40%, a huge feat that many scouts felt was his biggest hurdle heading into the NBA. He looked to be turning a corner from an efficiency standpoint after year 3, but after more injuries and a decreased role, Williams has now found himself behind many of his draft mates. He's no longer a starter, averages under double-digit points a game, and was bottom 20 in player efficiency rating this past season, despite being paid the most out of anyone on the list. Heading into year 6, he has a clear pathway for significant minutes with many vets being traded away, but Chicago has drafted 2 players in the lottery at his position, signaling a potential shift in development focus. It's clear that they're comfortable putting all their attention on the new projects they've invested in with Noah Senge and Matas Buzelis. Now these 3 guys were each drafted into totally different situations and all have had different results. It further proves that drafting projects are heavily dependent on the team's ability to develop, paired with the college profile of the prospect. But hands down my favorite case on a player with raw offensive skills, but legit superstar potential is Amen Thompson. Amen is the greatest example today of a player deemed a jump shot away, as he's arguably the best athlete in the NBA, and that alone has made his floor higher than many players in his draft class. His brother Sar has that same ability as well, but what separates Houston's twin over Detroit's is Amen pairs that elite defensive game with very good on-ball skills. He can get to any spot on the floor that he wants, but he's the true definition of a rim runner, and his best attribute offensively is in transition. Thompson's a sub 70% free throw shooter and a career 22% shooter from 3, but jumped from 13% his rookie year to 27% this past season. His mechanics are pretty rough right now, which leads to inconsistencies from beyond the arc. But during his improvements, out of the 91 threes he shot this past season, 54 of them were in the corner, shooting 37%, which was a huge jump from his rookie season, where he made just 2 corner threes the entire year. That's a big takeaway in his development right now, and shows he's slowly gaining comfort taking those shots. And head coach Ime Udoka encouraged taking these last year, emphasizing how he has to keep the defense honest even if the shots aren't going in. But the next step Amen has to make is above the break, as he shot 14% on shots in that area. This season, he can no longer hide in the corner anymore, as he's now the main ball handler on the championship contender. Thompson has all the cards in his favor right now. He's in a winning situation, plays a huge role on the team forcing him to get significant minutes, and now needs to grow up and improve after starting point guard Fred VanVleet tore his ACL this offseason. Houston has championship aspirations, and they all may fall on the improvement of Amen Thompson and that very poor jump shot of his. But he was a project with one of the highest floors I've seen from someone so raw offensively, and putting him in Houston gives me even more trust that they'll do right by him in his development. My argument is not that every raw prospect will turn out to be productive when given a lot of time and opportunity to grow. because some players just aren't good, period. It's a franchise's job to recognize which small amount of skills that prospect possess pre-draft that can translate or be developed in the pros. And I believe that only certain teams with certain situations should be drafting these raw talents high in the draft. Those teams should either be rebuilding and willing to continue to lose to give that player the chance to grow, or if they're contenders, have minutes available for that prospect to play through mistakes, or have a history of development on non-NBA ready prospects.